All right, welcome everyone to the Helm developer meeting of Thursday, April 29th, 2021. We're going to follow the same process as usual. First announcements and then discussions. So a couple of items, Bridget, you put in for announcements, the next release. I'll let you, maybe you can go down your list so I don't
Sure.
interrupt you, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Just a few items, keeping that drumbeat going. Next release, 360. The plan currently is to cut the RC on Monday, May 17th, which, given that KubeCon is coming very quickly. And then the release is planned for May 26th. So this means get your PRs, your reviews, etc. in. And a couple other things, we continue the Helm org repo audit. We're making a lot of progress there, so take a look at that. And then if you would like to participate in KubeCon EU next week, Karen has a spreadsheet. There's a couple of things you can participate in. You can participate and meet the maintainer, which means you're staffing the booth in the much improved KubeCon EU event platform. It's much better than last time. I was on it this morning. It's very good compared to last time. And then there's also project office hours that CNCF is going to be holding on Bevy. So please sign up for any of those. And we will not have this meeting next week because of KubeCon EU. I consulted longstanding community members and found, like Butcher and Farina, and found that we don't do it during KubeCon. Instead, we have lots and lots of other Helm related meetings during KubeCon, even more Helm than you could possibly want. So yeah, go ahead and sign up for and participate in all of those things next week. They will all be at delightfully early times for the US bound people, or the US based people. Any questions about any of that? I know it's a giant info dump, but I just want to put all that out there.
All right, thank you, Bridget. Any other announcements from anyone? All right, discussions. There were none, so I added two for myself. I apologize for the self-centered attitude. One of them is, I was hoping Butcher or Farina were going to be there. There was one item that they mentioned for backwards compatibility issue that I should update in the HIP. Maybe one of you knows. Basically, it's the YAML parsing. So from a security standpoint, apparently the recommendation is to do strict YAML parsing, so no optional fields. Anybody familiar with that?
I can comment on that one. And we can also revisit this conversation if it might be more relevant as well with Farina and Butcher. But basically, there was an issue inside of Go's YAML parser where if you included a field a second time, you could overwrite a field that was previously valid in there. So say you had like key value at the very top of the file. If you then injected another file underneath it that said key value, then that one would take precedence over that value. So that introduced a security issue where if someone previously set a value and expected that to be there, then an attacker somehow got access to the file, they could inject that same key value and inject their own values into the file. So to fix that, there's only one field inside of the Go parser options that allows you to basically disable that behavior. And to do that, you have to enable strict field checking. So what that does is the YAML parser checks the actual YAML document that gets parsed and checks it against the actual object inside of Go that you're expecting it to parse over into. If there are any extraneous fields that are not present inside of that object, then the parsing fails and says there's extra fields in here, so we have to fail out. It was kind of like a weird trade-off for the security issue because on one hand, we want to avoid that security issue entirely. The other trade-off is now that we have this strict value checking part of it. So if we wanted to address that issue, it would mean that we basically have to rewrite an entire Go, like an entire YAML parser in Go that would allow cases where you could not have strict value parsing, but then you also check for duplicate key fields inside of the document.
But from your explanation, it would allow optional fields. I mean, you could add an optional field, and the structure in the Helm's code would know about it, and if it's not present, that's okay from what you're saying.
Yes.
So because from backwards compatibility, it just means that, okay, somebody wants to extend the structure of a YAML file, they can say, okay, I add a new optional field. Files that don't have it will continue working. Files that do have it will work as well. So I think
so the
yeah,
problem here, I think, is forwards compatibility less so than backwards compatibility. If you introduce
right.
a new field into Helm 3.7 that is in the chart.yaml file, you'll add it to the Go object, and then the field will now be marked as optional in that new version of Helm. But if you use version Helm 3.6, which does
then
not
it will
have
break.
that Go object in there, that will be an unknown field and will fail validation. So that basically means that it can't be an optional field for 3.6 because of that strict parsing thing. So again, it's a chicken and egg problem. The real fix to this would be having a YAML parser that would allow it to not have strict parsing. So then we could allow this kind of situation to happen. But as it stands right now, that's the only way that we can do this to try and circumvent this whole security issue.
Does Helm guarantee any future compatibility of any kind? As in, so the YAML file, the chart.yaml file, do we want to protect so that charts are working with older versions of Helm?
Yeah, it's not
assume,
defined, but that's something we've always made a priority because we don't want to break people's charts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
wouldn't it make any changes a breaking change, and therefore would be jumping versions?
yeah, fundamentally, I think
Yes.
that's what it
Yeah.
does, right?
Yep.
So maybe in the backwards compatibility HIP, we basically have to say any YAML cannot change whatsoever. You can't add, you can't, well, removing, of course, but you can't add at all. You
Due to
can't
that-
modify, you can't do anything.
Due to that limitation, I
Yeah.
would say yes. If someone were to come back and address that limitation and fix it, which would basically mean someone needs to go and write a brand new YAML parser, which has its own slew of problems. But if someone were to basically try and figure out a way to take the Go YAML library and figure out how to detect duplicate keys without having strict checking enabled, then we could potentially reintroduce the idea of being able to add new fields and new versions. It's just a limitation of the technology that's preventing us from making that happen.
In the HIP, the suggestion, the comment from Farina was at least put a comment to explain why, new fields can't be added. So due to this, so I'll do that, and that's sufficient for me. Thank you for the information, and we'll see what Butcher has to say, because he was commenting on it.
Yeah, just another thought on there. It might be worth doing like a optional command line argument, like disable strict YAML or something like that. And that way, if someone does run around changing, adding fields to their YAML because they have some custom tooling that also reads the file, they have an option to disable strict checking. And then we would just, based on that flag, change if we're using the strict YAML or the regular YAML.
But you're saying to have Helm have this option?
Just, yeah.
But then you'd introduce the security risk back, though.
Well, that's why you have it as a flag, right? They have to purposefully set a command line flag to disable strict checking. And so that's them,
I wonder if do we
yes,
want to allow
understand.
the user to shoot themselves in the foot, or I guess it's.
I would be very, very cautious of circumventing things that are being put in place to allow or like to prevent security issues. If you're like circumventing it to allow it, it's a bit of a concern for me. I would say it would be more of let's try and address the root cause of the issue, which is the strict check parsing, and move from there rather than try and give people the foot gun.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, thank you for the info. Next
Well,
item.
one last thought on that.
Yes, of course.
So the strict checking, when that's enabled, it doesn't error out. If I remember correctly, it just makes it so it ignores any fields that aren't explicit in the struct.
I thought that was actually the difference between strict checking and not strict checking. I thought like the default YAML parser actually ignores it completely, but if you enable strict checking, it does error out on those fields being present.
Okay, I retract that then.
Yeah, I think Farina, Butcher, and I were reviewing the security issue, and that was the big crux of this whole enable the strict checking, was because like, oh, now any fields that are in there that shouldn't be in there can actually break users.
Okay.
I mean, if you'd want to go and verify that, that would be great. But I think that is the actual expected behavior here.
Okay.
And is this for all the YAML files or some of them?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah,
So
it's the plugin file, it's the index, and
just not values.
yeah, just not values. Well, yeah, no, yeah, not values. You're right.
So out of curiosity, from a security perspective, Helm wants to protect, I assume they would be especially files that you get from somebody else, right? So chart files, repository files, but files that Helm generates, are we as concerned from a security standpoint? So actually the repository file would be a file I think we generate, while index files are files we're getting. So do we need to protect against, for example, that kind of attack when we generate the repository file? Who cares if, I mean, can the hacker get to that? So that means, do we need the strict parser for files that Helm generates? Do we care? Or I assume it was just across the board, close everything?
It's anything that can be changed and modified by the user, which is any YAML file.
Oh, okay. So if the system gets hacked and then there's blah, 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 and it goes into that file.
Yeah, that's the attack vector.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks for the clarification. The other point I put was just HIP 10 for the distributed pick process is kind of ready. Farina on one side is interested in getting it in. Fisher, you had concerns, so I left it there for whenever somebody has time to decide what should be done. Next item, Josh, registry support, OCI distribution, and ORAS.
Hello. Yeah, I just wanted to provide a few updates on the registry support. Seeing a lot of GitHub comments along the lines of like, when will it be non-experimental? When will this and that be supported? So the distribution spec, which is the API that registries use, we put it up for a 1.0 vote this week. So that it doesn't look like there's any objection. So that should go out soon. So some of the original, I wish Farina was here, but some of the original concerns about that being experimental is whether that spec was going to have life to it. So that will be coming out. And like all the major clouds have kind of signed off on what's in there. Beyond that, there is in the works a movement of the ORAS project, which is under the Deus Labs organization right now. to be a CNCF sandbox project. So that's in progress as well. And so as part of all that, the hope is that the Aura stuff will be stabilized, distribution spec is stabilized, and I will be doing work against the HIP number 6, which is like the remaining stuff that we kind of talked about to be completed before experimental's off. So expect some of that coming in the next month or so, and maybe we can hope to get that into 3.7, maybe, or 3.8. So that's it for that.
That's great to hear. I really like the fact that the distribution spec is coming up for version 1.0 vote. Does that include the artifacts proposal as well? Is that part of it too, or is that a separate document?
Yeah, it's sort of a loaded question. And that I would say is probably the one outstanding questionable thing. Like putting Helm charts in a registry is not, or like putting alternative non-container things in a registry is not written anywhere in that spec. At the same time, since we've put the support in, Amazon, Google, Azure, those three all support it, and I think we're trying to get Docker Hub to lift the restrictions too. But so like it's not technically in a spec, but like it's supported, so it's a little bit of a gray area still. But I think it's kind of like if we release the support, then I feel like the companies will lift the wall. But I don't know, happy to like talk more about that.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to see if that was being part of the discussions or if that's still something that's like not part of the actual vote or not. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, it's not part of the vote. The API, like if you go read it, it used to be like a 3,000 line README, and it's now like 300 lines or something. And it really tries to not focus on the format of the JSON and that. It's just like, these are the endpoints, and you need to send some sort of document, like a manifest, which is typically going to be like a OCI image manifest, but it doesn't like define that. The other spec is image spec, but that's that defines those JSON schemas, but that is totally related to containers. So I don't have a clear answer for you. I would, Matt, like it would be cool if you could join one of the OCI calls soon, and we can kind of like just like ask the elephant in the room questions about it. But
yeah,
I don't know what to say.
I wouldn't be happy to kind of open up that can of worms again, but yeah, I'd be happy to join that call and ask some difficult questions, because that's kind of like contingent on the whole thing here, right? Is if the OCI distribution spec says that it's not okay, but then like we have cloud vendors who are supporting it, then where do we go here? Is it actually the distribution spec, or is it something else that we need to start talking about? So
I think, yeah, and I think part of the challenge was getting the spec to a 1.0. There's a ton of outstanding stuff, like even the auth, like the kind of token flow that is kind of implicit. Everyone's writing clients against this auth spec that doesn't actually exist. So I think once the 1.0 comes out, maybe a 1.1 can talk about auth. 1.2 talks about the artifacts. I don't know. It was just like people keep wanting to put stuff in there, and we had to just finally get it out the door. So I'm hopeful that, I don't know. It's hard to get people to agree on this stuff for real. So
All right, any more questions on that topic?
I'll answer Paul's question in the chat. So the question's, does Harbor CNCF registry support Helm charts? And the answer is yes. They're actually planning to drop Chart Museum from a future release in order to move to this system.
Other questions? All right, moderator notes and triage. Do we have anybody yet? We have notes. Thanks, Karina.
Butcher said that if nobody else signs up, that he would happily sign up for triage this week. So I can voluntold Butcher that he's issued triage for this week.
As
I think we
Bridget
probably,
brought up,
yeah, we probably want 2 people if we can, because it's a
'cause it's
2-week
2 weeks.
stint.
Oh, good call. I can help with Butcher.
And Adam has volunteered for moderator. All right, thank you very much. There are no more points. Anybody wants to bring up something in the remaining 5 minutes?
Joe had added a topic that he was wondering if it could get into 3.6. Joe, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Joe Lanford and I worked together on this PR to take some of the weight code and turn it into a readiness library. It makes no functional changes. Everything works exactly the same as it always did, but now a library call could be made to check a release to see if its components are ready, which is nice for like after install readiness checks.
Yeah, I don't see why not. It would just be a matter of getting a couple of maintainers to go and take a review of it. So if the intent is not to change any behavior code, but is just to expose certain things so then others can use it, I see no reason why not. So
that is the goal.
Fisher, do we want to get it a few reviews before we drop it in that milestone, or should we drop it in the milestone hoping to get it some reviews?
no, usually we can just, if it's ready for a review for a milestone, it's good to drop it in the milestone, then we can follow up and address it there.
Awesome, thanks.
Excellent. Somebody else? No one? We want to save the last 4 minutes. All right, so enjoy KubeCon for those that will be there or there. And we'll see you in 2 weeks then. Everybody have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, folks.
Goodbye.
Thanks.